The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is fluff. It's a farce.
The world saw a rock god, but nobody knew that even inside his own kingdom, he remained a terrified outsider. What grim price did this business exact for his perfect face? His war started long before the first stadium lights turned on. The diagnosis, Microtia, sounded clinical, but the reality was horrifying. He had no right ear. He was deaf on one side, but he heard the peer taunts loud and clear. He realized, if you aren't born perfect, you have to reinvent yourself from scratch. His path to fame wasn't a chase for money. It was an act of desperate resistance. Creating Kiss was his way of saying, "Go to hell," to everyone who treated him like a nobody. He didn't grow that jet black mane for fashion. It was the only shield he had to hide his deformity from prying eyes. He didn't paint that famous star around his right eye for shock value. It was a brilliant sleight of hand. It worked. He created the Starchild, a flawless god of love. The very people who would have tormented him in school were now paying just to catch a glimpse of him. It seemed he had outplayed destiny. But this victory came with a terrifying price. He won the adoration of millions, but that love was meant for the mask, not the man. The higher he flew, the more terrified he became. He thought he had brought the industry to its knees. He didn't realize he had just locked himself in a golden cage. The camera lenses were now tracking his every move, waiting for just one thing: a stray gust of wind to blow back his hair and expose the truth he was so desperately trying to hide. Paul Stanley's real executioner wasn't drugs, booze, or even the greedy suits bleeding the band dry. He was being killed slowly, methodically, by the silence. The silence that lived on the right side of his head since birth. This physical defect became the perfect torture device in the hands of show business. In the 1970s, the music industry wasn't a creative lab. It was a cynical slaughterhouse where only the prettiest specimens survived. The stage demanded golden gods. Just look at Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin, the lion's mane, the perfect symmetry, the embodiment of masculine power. That was the gold standard. Labels were peddling to millions of teenagers. Paul Stanley would look at those glossy posters, then turn to the mirror. And there, he saw a death sentence. To the producers, a kid with a deformed ear that looked like melted wax was a defective part, unsellable. You couldn't put him on the cover of Rolling Stone without airbrushing. In their world, a flaw meant weakness, and weakness doesn't print money. The business offered him a deal dipped in poison: kill your identity, erase your past, give us a flawless picture, and we'll give you stadiums. And Paul signed that contract. He single-handedly dismantled his own personality to assemble a glossy Frankenstein. Every layer of white grease paint was an act of erasing the real Paul Stanley. He gave the industry exactly what it demanded: a sterile, perfect product, stripped of human flaws. The show ended for the audience, but never for him. The system turned his existence into an endless con that ran 24 hours a day. Look closely at the archive footage from the 1970s. You'll see Paul is almost always turning his left side to the camera or covering up with his hair. That wasn't style, that was the reflex of a hunted animal. The system conditioned him to live in constant physical tension. He learned to give interviews, laugh, and even make love in a way that ensured no one ever touched his right side. Showbiz made him terrified of simple human tenderness, turning every touch into a potential threat of exposure. He became a virtuoso of deceit, but that deception was burning him out from the inside. But this contract with the devil hit with full force at the moment of his absolute triumph. It didn't happen in a producer's office, but on stage, facing a roaring sea of fans. In that instant, he didn't feel the joy of victory. He felt a bone-chilling horror. 20,000 people were screaming his name in ecstasy. Girls were fainting, but Paul suddenly realized a terrifying truth. Their love was for the painted star. If he were to wash off the makeup right now and show them his real, deformed ear, that roar would turn to dead silence or disgust. In that second, the trap snapped shut. He had forged his own chains. The mask, meant to protect, had grown into his skin and started to suffocate him. Now he was forced to play the Starchild every second of his life, because the real Paul, a lonely guy deaf in one ear, had been destroyed for the sake of the show. He won the war for fame, but his trophy was eternal, absolute loneliness inside his own legend. The stage got its idol, but Paul Stanley lost the right to be human. Paul Stanley believed the summit of the music Olympus would be his fortress. He was dead wrong. The higher Kiss climbed, the harder show business hammered his most vulnerable spot, his self-esteem. The first blow came from the press. Critics, posing as guardians of high art, absolutely hated Kiss. They dismissed them as painted clowns and hacks. For Gene Simmons, this was just noise and free PR. But for Paul, the word clown echoed like a taunt down a high school hallway. The journalists were punching a fresh bruise on an old wound. They refused to see the musician behind the glitter. Their articles confirmed his worst childhood fear. Without the mask, he was a zero. The business refused to acknowledge his talent, seeing him only as a circus freak who got lucky enough to con the public. He conquered the charts, but he couldn't conquer the respect he craved so badly. The second blow was personal and cut much deeper. It came from the man standing next to him on every poster. While Paul built defensive walls around himself, Gene Simmons turned fame into a frantic assembly line of carnal pleasures. Gene slept with thousands of women, monetizing every inch of his tongue and his demon persona. He reveled in his role as a monster. It gave him freedom. Paul watched this endless feast and felt isolated. His Starchild was an icon of love for millions, yet he remained frighteningly alone. Gene's success was a daily reminder to Paul. Even in their own kingdom, he remained an outsider, afraid to take off his armor and let anyone in. But the final, killing blow came from his family. The band he built as a sanctuary for outcasts began to rot from the inside. Ace Frehley and Peter Criss were drowning in an ocean of booze and powder. The studio, which should have been their temple, turned into a war zone. The men who swore to watch his back became dead weight. The stage demanded a show at any cost. It didn't give a damn that the drummer couldn't hold his sticks or the guitarist could barely stand. Paul morphed into a babysitter for grown men. He wasn't just writing songs anymore. He became a hostage to other people's irresponsibility. While the others crashed cars and lost their grip on reality, Paul shouldered an impossible burden. He became the lonely Atlas, holding up the crumbling sky of Kiss. He was desperately patching holes in the ship while his own crew was trying to sink it. And in that moment, the terrible irony hit him. He was the glue of this band, the one saving the empire from collapse. But no one, absolutely no one, asked the question, who is going to glue him back together? He was surrounded by millions of fans, but in reality, he was standing alone in the middle of a burning building he had built himself. Show business had drained him dry, leaving him one-on-one with the mirror he was still too terrified to look into. Stories about 1970s rock idols usually end in overdose or obscurity. But Paul Stanley pulled off the most radical rebellion possible. He survived. In 1982, already a multi-millionaire and a living legend, he went under the knife. It wasn't a vanity project to look younger. Surgeons carved a piece of cartilage from his rib to construct what nature had denied him, a real ear. It was his final, silent triumph. Think about it. He forced show business and the entire world to worship the freak he believed himself to be. He made the planet fall in love with the music of a partially deaf boy before he ever fixed his body. He hacked reality. He proved that his talent was louder than his physical flaw. But this victory left a bitter aftertaste. Paul Stanley conquered his insecurities, but he could never kill his creation. Even today, half a century later, he is forced to paint on the star just to face the crowd. The stage accepted his terms, but in exchange, it took his face forever. The Starchild became immortal, consuming the man who invented him. And now, knowing the price of this lie, ask yourself one question. If this business forced the greatest frontman in history to hide his true face for half his life just to be accepted, how fake is the perfect life of the idol you are following right now? Who do you really believe when you stare into that screen?